Will Senator Tim Scott be able to break out? I mean, especially in light of the fact that there are so many already running for this nomination who can't even break into the double digits percentage-wise.
Well, good morning, Adrienne. It is a busy week in politics, and I do think that Tim Scott absolutely has a lane. Look, Tim Scott is actually friends with Democrats and Republicans. He has tried to get legislation across the line working with Democrats, whether it was on criminal justice reform or opportunity zones, investing in some of our low-income communities. He's worked across the party line. Make no mistake, he is very conservative. He voted against Obamacare. He is someone who is going to talk about his faith and stand up those values. But in Iowa, I think he differentiates himself because he is someone that both sides like and both sides work with. I think he's someone who will turn away from the more toxic or divisive rhetoric and really talk about his faith in America, and stand out in that lane. I remember being in Iowa in the early days of the Obama campaign, and everyone wrote us off. I will not write off Tim Scott. I think he's got a lot of friends, even dating back to his college years, that are going to be there for him. And I think it's an exciting candidacy.
Well, he reportedly has $22 million of campaign cash on hand, so apparently he has a whole lot of friends. But Scott has more of a gentleman's approach. You kind of touched on that just now in speaking to my earlier guest. He has that traditional Southern hospitality a bit when he is discussing his platform and his policy. But will he have to come out swinging a bit more, especially when it comes to the fact that you've got people like Governor Ron DeSantis who are predicted to join this field?
I do think someone's going to have to eventually, really know that they're not running against Joe Biden. They're running against Donald Trump and against DeSantis. But Tim Scott, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see him differentiate himself, like I said, with that faith in politics platform. I think what you're going to likely see is DeSantis is going to have to take on Trump if he stands any chance, because he's kind of running in the same lane as Donald Trump is, with more of the MAGA base, whereas Tim Scott is trying to make a broader appeal. And so he may stand a chance to run a more positive campaign. We can only hope in politics that that positive campaign can actually work these days.
And again, he doesn't shy away. Senator Scott doesn't shy away from issues of race. I know that he's certainly going to have that come up in the conversation surrounding his candidacy and his campaign. But a couple of things to discuss. 2 years ago, President Biden had 90% approval among black voters in AP polling. That has plunged to 58%. And over the past couple of years, young black voters are now voting Republican more than ever. That was one of the headlines from 2022's midterms. The gains in the Republican Party by minority voters. Should Democrats be concerned?
I think Democrats need to find their message on the economy. And when it comes to Tim Scott, he's actually someone who has built a business. He was in the insurance industry before he moved into Congress. And then, of course, Nikki Haley actually appointed him into the Senate. Democrats are struggling because, look, too many people for too many years have been spending on this credit card. So you saw the Trump administration, while, you have some Republicans now saying they want spending cuts when it comes to this debt ceiling, spend. During the Trump administration, there was the Trump tax breaks, there was then the COVID funds. And so you're seeing this massive inflation. So there's a huge economic issue. And I'm not sure that any candidate is yet making that argument. Tim Scott could be poised to make that argument, especially in communities of color. And I will say, I think the Biden administration has a number of hurdles, not least of which the president's age is a big issue. If the Republicans nominate Donald Trump, he would have been a freshman when Joe Biden was a senior in high school. And so they're not that different in age. Tim Scott or Nikki Haley or even Mike Pence would be a very different generation. And so I think the Republicans would have a much stronger chance with virtually any candidate other than Donald Trump.
Johanna Maska, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.